This assignment comes at a pertinent moment as major floods hit southern Germany and central France, including the city of Paris. These kind of flooding and other similar disasters demonstrate the increasing impacts of climate change on our planet's natural and human systems. In Switzerland, where I live, the impacts of climate change range from melting glaciers to more frequent and severe heat waves and flooding. For example, in Geneva in 2015, there was flooding in May that was followed by a heat wave a few months later. During the flooding, the city government was forced to issue alerts and also protect housing and neighborhoods from flooding. So what action should be taken to address the impacts of climate change? And what are some of the barriers? In Geneva, climate action needs to focus on mitigation and adaptation alike. On mitigation through measures such as investment in renewable energy production and energy efficiency, or climate-sensitive urban development techniques to manage future urban growth. And on adaptation, efforts need to be put into better disaster preparedness and disaster management through measures such as better watershed management, through, for example, conserving the forests around the canton and broadening river basins to handle bigger discharges. As in other cities, there are barriers to climate action in Geneva. These barriers could range from institutional to political leadership to financing. At the moment, the city has a vision for cutting down its greenhouse gas emissions to zero by 2050, while simultaneously increasing the use of renewable energy from the current 3% to 100% during the same period. Some action towards this vision has already been undertaken, but the road is long and the goal is very ambitious. In order to arrive at the final destination, one needs continued and sustained political leadership and financial resources, as well as a favorable regulatory environment are needed. So we need to act differently and step up our efforts. So whose problem is climate change? And who needs to act? And what is my particular role in all of this? Climate change is a global challenge that affects all countries around the world, including the least developed, the developing, and the developed. As such, global collective action taken by all countries is necessary to combat its challenges. With the endorsement of the Paris Climate Agreement in December 2015, governments have come together and have acknowledged the importance of taking action together to tackle climate change. To this end, pledges made for financing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and implement adaptation measures are very encouraging. In order to facilitate climate action on the ground, governments, civil society groups, academic institutions, private sector, and individual citizens like myself need to come together to bring about the necessary change. So at the country level, for example, the national governments and the local governments should work on concrete and coordinated multi-sectoral programs that would help reduce national greenhouse gas emissions and adapt the existing infrastructure and landscape to the national adaptation challenges. At the individual level, one should undertake action to reduce one's carbon footprint, of course, and beyond that, participate in promoting and assisting climate action as much as possible. As for myself, given my background in sustainable development and my interest in international development, I'm planning on engaging in project implementation in the area of climate change adaptation and resilience and climate change mitigation in the developing countries, because I know that developing countries, and particularly the least developed countries, receive the brunt of climate change impacts, and they're the most vulnerable. And that's where I would like to go to be able to help those communities prepare and manage the impacts of climate change. So in conclusion, climate change is a global and urgent challenge. As we have learned in this class, we need to act now, we need to act differently, and we need to act together to be able to manage the impacts that are associated with it.